Welcome. In today's podcast, I want to talk about anxiety. Anxiety is something that a lot of people suffer from, and they don't have to. But to really understand anxiety, there's a disclaimer. A disclaimer that people will struggle with, will rebuke, will refuse most of the time until they're ready to admit it and to see it for what it is. Once they pass through that disclaimer, then they can really address anxiety. And the disclaimer is as follows. You are not anxious. You are not suffering from anxiety, right? It is not something that is active within you and that you have to deal with. It's not a disease. That's not what you are. And that's not what you're facing. But it is true that when you say, I am anxious, yeah, you are, because you're creating it. And that's the biggest disclaimer. That's the biggest nuance one needs to understand when dealing with anxieties. So let's debunk that. Let's talk about this because this is such a big subject in our days. Stress and anxiety and all that jazz. So why do we feel that we're anxious or we suffer from anxiety? People will think it's psychological. In reality, it's not. It's just plain physics. What do I mean by that? Well, if you go sit down with a psychiatrist, they will try to analyze and debunk why what you are anxious about is making you feel anxious and where it's that coming from. And what they're really trying to do is allow you to connect with what stirs you up inside. I think, as a matter of fact, isn't it why you go to therapy in the first place, right? You want somebody to help you get the stuff out because you know it's not there. You're not oblivious, otherwise you wouldn't go in the first place. So you know something's up and you want to bring it up, but you don't know how. And every time you do, and every time it comes up, you don't know how to deal with it. But all you might talk about in this context will sound very much coming from your thinking mind. And yes, part of it is true, but it's much deeper than that. And to explore this, well, we have to shift gear a little bit. We have to go on the spirituality side. We have to go explore yoga. We have to go and explore those deep truths. And the deep truth is the same for everybody. We all work exactly in the same way. So let me synthesize it for you. Try to make it, as simple as I can. We all go through our lot of experiences in life. Good, less good, whatever happens. And these are experiences we go through. With our parents, with our siblings, within our work, with friends at school when we're young, with relatives, with anything. Everything we go through is an experience that we get to live and experience or experiment with. For the vast majority of us, me including, some of those experiences, we don't just experience them and then forget about them. We experience them, it rocks our boat, and we store it inside. We keep it in there and we make a whole mess with it. Right there and then, when it happens, days later, weeks later, years later, decades later, it's still there and it's still bothering us every time another experience allows us to remember or think about what we stored inside. So let's say, as you grew up as a kid, you were grounded for, I don't know, like not finishing your plate, right? That was a big deal in your house. Every time you did not finish your plate, there was grounding and shouting and consequences or whatnot. Well, maybe 30 some odd years later, 50 odd years later, you're still wiping up your plate clean, even though you're not hungry anymore, because every time you see a plate that has a little bit of food left, it reminds you of what happened as a kid, and it stirs up something inside of you that is so uncomfortable that you just finish your plate to be done with it and not think about that and not feel what you need to feel about this event that happened moons ago. That's just a basic example, but you can pick on anything that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you desirous, that makes you fearless, not fearless, but fearful, sorry, that makes you hangry, that makes you sad, anything that sparks within you an emotion that's correlated to fear or something that's correlated to wanting, desiring something, it's all coming from the same place. And that's where it's coming from. You stored something inside that you haven't allowed yourself to process, that you haven't allowed yourself to fully experience and let go of, and just be at peace with it. And so every time it comes up, it is so uncomfortable that instead of going through the pain, because it is painful to go through that stuff, instead of going through the pain that you need to go through in order to just be done with this thing, let it be, let it go, let it out, whatever. Well, you start playing with it instead. It's like you would take your hands inside and just try to manipulate how you feel and how you think and try to make it better or try to make it go away or even worse, suppress it. That's why psychology talks about suppression and repression and stuff like that. Let me pause here because, in a nutshell, that's what it is. And that's quite important. Now, what's happening behind that is really where people don't tend to go to. In yoga, we call these things that we keep inside samskaras. They're like impressions, if you'd like. They're impressions of stuff that happened that you were not able to deal with at this point. You were not able to let them out, and you kept them inside. How did this happen? That's where I want to go, so that you really understand the deeper meaning of what's going on with you when that happens. The event in itself is an event just like any other event. Whatever you went through that still bugs you today, that's still causing you trouble today, if you would have another person next to you at this very same moment that you stored something inside, perhaps the other person would not make a mess of it all. It would be like riding water for them. So it's not true that the event specifically, because of what it is the problem, because some other person next to you might go through the same thing and it's nothing for them. So what is it then, right? What does it have to do inside so that you get stuck with something and the other don't or doesn't? And that's where we need to talk about energy. Everything is energy based. And this is not just woo stuff, it's just plain reality, truth. Go and read about quantum physics, and they will tell you that point blank. Everything you did look at is energy. Behind matter, behind solid, behind everything we see and touch and is energy. Yeah, they are able to come down to protons and electrons and bosons and whatnot. But behind that, there's a tremendous void. And yet it creates what it creates. It's energy. Everything is energy. It's all the same energy, right? But the same energy that's going through you and me, depending on how we see it and how we judge it and how we go about it, will create different ripples. Try to think of every great tradition uses this example, so let's use it. A lake, a mirror clear lake. All right, let's think about that. Even a leaf, you don't have to throw a rock or a pebble, just a leaf will create some sort of waves in there. Those waves, they are what you feel inside. Perhaps for me, it's just a little wave. It's a leaf falling into the event. Same event happens to you and me. For me, it's a leaf. For you, it's a big pebble. For somebody else, a big rock. It creates waves and ripples. The same energy changes according to how we deal with it and how we play with it. And who's doing that? Well, it's our consciousness. That's where it gets a little bit complicated. It took me some time to get this, really. If there's only one consciousness, if there's only one soul, and if it's already pure and beautiful, how can it mess around with what's happening inside of me? Well, consciousness has a quality. It will stick to whatever you give attention to. If an event happens to me and the same happens to you, let's say, I don't know, we get in a car accident. Okay, that's a big deal. It's a big thing. I got into my fair share of car accidents when I was younger. One time, I remember our car flipped over, ended up on the side of the highway on the after a bunch of spins, and ended up on the rooftop. We were upside down, and it was kind of, it was a big accident. In my case, I never had any difficulties going back and behind a wheel after that. I never got scared into, in icy conditions. It happened during the winter. I never got scared driving the winter. I never got scared in any type of conditions or behind the wheel or being driven or anything like that. So something happened. It created big waves, big ripples. And I could have kept it inside, but I didn't. So what's the link with consciousness here? Well, I'm conscious of what's happening. I'm living it. I'm experiencing it. But instead of getting down to my, lower self and judging and being trying to and fusing with my fears and being scared about anything related to driving, I just went through the accident, lived what I have to live, experienced it, and then said, all right, well, That's it. It's behind me. Let's move on. Somebody that would go through the same thing might, on the opposite, get scared to death. Wouldn't want to drive anymore. Wouldn't want to be in a car even, perhaps, anymore, because those big ripples, those immense waves that the accident created inside, energy-wise, was so important for them. They were the same for me, by the way, big waves, right? But they were so important to them that they fused with what happened. Fear took over. Sadness took over. There's a bunch of emotions and things that you start to think when you have those things happening in your life, small or big, but a car accident is quite big. So there's a lot going on inside. You get fearful, you get stressed, you get scared, you get angry maybe because you did something that you shouldn't have done. You get sad because somebody got hurt or whatnot. A lot of emotions going on in there. And then the mind just kicks in, and those two, the heart and the mind, they work together, right? They're they're like two pieces of a pie, basically. And as soon as that starts going on, and your consciousness fuses with that, and then you just let it keep going, and you contribute to it, and you fuel it. Well, at that point, you're creating an impression. You're storing something inside that you'll have to let out at one point one day, because if you don't, and some people don't, well, it's going to create suffering for you. So I don't know if you see the nuance there behind all of the psyche stuff and emotions, but it's really a dance of energy and consciousness that's happening. And it's the same thing for you. Whatever your stuff are, it's the same thing that's happening. An event happens, you go through this experience, and you have two paths. You either let it go, you go through it, and it is what it is, and you move on, or you stumble upon it, and it creates something inside that will stay there based on my consciousness fusing with those emotions and patterns of thinking and negative voice and judgment and feelings and fears and angriness and whatnot. And that moment, the moment that happens, this fusion creates a small or a big impression. And it's still there. And that's going to follow you for the rest of your life if you don't let it out. And then what happens? Well, every time you go through an event that resembles what you stored inside, this thing is going to get reignited. In a previous podcast, I explained it with like a circular motion. If you store something inside that's energy based, energy can stay still, it has to move. Well, it's like this, right? It's moving around, it's there. It's dormant, but it's there. And as soon as something from the outside pokes it, because it resembles it, then it starts to spin again. It spins faster, and maybe sometimes it goes crazy. Until you suppress it again, shut it off, push it back down, or you fuel it with new thoughts and new emotions, and you just reactivate the whole thing, and you go through the same weird feelings in your body and your emotions and whatnot. And then you forget about it until the next time. And that, my friends, well, is what people that go through anxiety go through. It is the same thing, same pattern. If you're telling me right now, I'm an anxious person, or I'm suffering from anxiety, well, the good news is that you can free yourself from that. And no one will do it. Not even a shrink, not even a psychiatrist, not even me. I mean, they can all guide you in their own aspects of it all. But you're going to do it. You're going to free yourself from it if you want to. Nobody else. Because you put it yourself in this position in the first place. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow. Basically, Max, you're telling me it's my fault? Yeah, but you didn't know better. So don't beat yourself up. It's okay. I know, I've been there, done that more than you think. That actually hit me like a hammer right in the forehead. And I read that moons ago from, I think it was Eckhart Tolle. He said something along those lines. I'm just paraphrasing now, but he was inviting us to take responsibility for our own predicament. And I was like, no way, I say. I mean, it is not my fault. I don't want to deal with that. It happened. I'm the victim. And no way I'm responsible for the stuff that I'm feeling bad about or I'm suffering with. But nobody planted that seed there. Nobody did that for me. Nor did, I don't know, some people push it to the extent of life, or God did that to punish me or whatnot, or it's my it's my fate. There's no such thing as fate. You create your own fate. That's a difficult pill to swallow. But when we start to grasp and have an understanding of how everything we're stuck with today comes from, how it's been built, and why it's coming up again, and why do I feel the way I feel, and then we can start to ease on it. Step back enough and acknowledge that, yeah, after all, I am responsible for that. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful because the moment you realize that, you just opened up a new door, another possibility for you to go deeper in this healing process that you need to go through and free yourself from the stuff that you store inside. So it is really a process of freeing yourself from yourself. So when people tell me I'm anxious about that, or I'm suffering from anxiety, well, you are, because you're fueling it. So what now, right? If I'm fueling it, well, how do I stop fueling it, and how do I start, being less anxious or stressed about things? Well, you got to do this process for yourself. You got to do the work. Pick on one thing that you're struggling with. Don't start with the big stuff, right? Start small. Start smaller. That's going to help you. But let's say, I don't know, something comes up in my mind because I've observed this live. Let's say that you care about someone, you love someone, and that person got hurt in one way or another doing something. And every time you see that person coming close to the place or the tool or whatever they got hurt by, well, that's how you feel inside, right? I don't know the word for that. You feel bad inside. Something happens inside that wants you to tell that person, just don't do that. Get away from there. Don't touch that thing. You know what happened last time? You get so scared and so anxious inside that you try to manipulate the situation or the person so that they don't do or be or touch whatever it is, so that you feel good and you feel at ease. pick on this, right? And try to remember the whole process that we explained a bit earlier. Here's an event that happened. A person got hurt doing something or touching something. It left an impression on me because it created ripples that my mind and heart and consciousness focused on, and it created an impression that I'm left with now. And this impression is in me, it's still active. Now, the next time that the person gets close to the thing or the place or the whatever situation that hurt them in the first place, and you are seeing that, this impression that you stored inside is being reactivated. All those feelings of fears, of sadness, of angriness, of being scared are coming up again. All of those thoughts about, what happens last time, those thoughts about maybe an image that you saw that you didn't, go through because it was, quite difficult. It was blood or whatnot. All that is happening again in a blink of an eye. It's all coming up. And because that's happening, your default mode is to play with that so that you don't feel those bad emotions and have those thoughts. How do we typically go about this? Well, it's by trying to control and manipulate either the situation or the person. And some people go to big extent to do that so that they feel safe. Some people will get rid of the tool that hurt the person. Some other people will create those big fences so that nothing bad happens again. Other people will move, will sell the place, will, whatever. Will I don't know. We can go to big extent to control and manipulate either an environment, the situation, or the person so that we don't get to feel those things inside. And if we don't go to those big extent, well, in the moment, it will typically come out as, just don't do this, or don't go there, or don't touch that. Or I told you that never to do this again. It makes me feel anxious. It makes me feel scared. You remember what happened last time. Or you might be constantly checking on the person as soon as you know that they're close to that tool or that place or whatnot. And you're just fueling that anxiety like it's nonstop. It's crazy. This is what's happening. And here again, you have two choices. You either keep doing what you're doing, which is suppressing, repressing, call it whatever you want, same thing, controlling, manipulating the situation, the environment, the person, so that you don't feel all that stuff inside. Or you decide to be die yogi and to go through what you need to go through and free yourself from this shit from this shit. It's like giving you two options. Do you want to live in fear and anxiety and stress and mental spin, negative mental spinning? Or would you like to live in harmony, peace, and bliss? Well, for most people, I think it's obvious. We all want to be in harmony and bliss and peace. But in the moment, we forget about that option. And our consciousness and our energy all directed again to that impression and those feelings and those thoughts that are coming up inside. And so we need to be ready to do the work to go through the peace and the harmony and the bliss. But to get there, it's not going to be funny at first. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be hard. Let's stick to that example we were using. The next time you see that person that you like that you love, getting close to that thing, that place, that tool, whatever that got them hurt in the past, well, you're going to have to catch yourself going through all those weird emotions and thinking and all that energy coming up again. It wants to go out. It wants to come up. You don't have to do a thing. Trust me. It will do it on its own. It doesn't want to be there. It wants to be clean inside. It wants to be nice. It wants to be pure, happy, peaceful, and blissful. So as soon as the opportunity arises for this negative energy stuff that you stored to come up, it will. It will. And the most beautiful thing behind that is that it's a very pure, loving energy that's pushing this thing to come up again. So you see how weird we are? This beautiful energy, loving energy is pushing up that bad stuff that's stuck in you to go up. And then it goes up and you have a chance to transmute it, transform it into something pure and loving and nice again, so that it goes out into the world as being as clean and as loving as it came in. But instead, you play with it and you store it back down, or you try to control and manipulate, and then you create all those ripples again, and then an impression stays there. And all that bad energy keeps on being active within you. Life is so loving. It's unbelievable. It will give you every opportunity lovingly to get rid of that stuff. But because we are responsible of our actions and behaviors and thinking and whatnot, we go back down there and we play with it and we try to control, manipulate, and we get stuck with it. Instead of doing the work, the inside job, the internal work, call it whatever you want, same thing, to work with it, because it is what you have to do. You have to work with that stuff. So the person comes up close to the place, thing, tool, whatever that hurt them, and then it starts inside. It pokes right at where it needs to poke, and then the whole shit show starts again. And then you lovingly have to catch yourself going through that motion of trying to say something, do something, control the situation or the person so that you feel at peace again. And really, you're not at peace. You're just shoving it back down. But anyways, you think you're at peace. So you got to catch yourself. That's the clutcher. That's the most important moment. You got to catch yourself wanting or desiring to play and control and touch this situation so that you feel okay again. And you got to stop. You got to step back, stop, and allow yourself to let this thing come up and feel it for what it is. Not pretty. It's not fun. It hurts. It's painful. It's been stored with pain. It's going to come out with pain. That's for sure. But it is only by doing that you're going to allow this energy to transmute, transform, and free yourself from this little part of you that's not at peace, that's not at ease, that's not in harmony with what's happening. And if you do that 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, it might take a while. I always repeat it. You got to be compassionate and patient on the spiritual path. It's a requirement. If you're not doing it, you're not going to evolve. Simple as that. But the minute you catch yourself and you work with it, you refrain from saying what you wanted to say. You stop from wanting to do something about it. Well, there's a little part of you that's going to transform. And slowly but surely, might be quicker than you think. That event, that situation, that context that you tag it as anxiety or prone to being anxious will leave. It will leave. And then you won't feel as anxious about it as you would. And you repeat and do it again and again. And meanwhile, you're doing it with other things and other things and other things. And this whole process will just do its thing on its own. It's going to clean you. It's going to cleanse you. You don't have to put objectives. You don't have to be smart, goal-oriented about it. You don't have to do anything other than being very conscious and working with yourself to let it go through, relax, release it. You can use your mind that if you want, that can help you. You know, there's multiple ways you can do this. But you use your higher mind. You use the one that sees clearly, that sees with objectivity. Krishnamurti used to call it objective consciousness. Yeah. Or objective observation, I think. Yeah, objective observation. I think that's how he used to call it. You observe objectively what's happening. And if you want to use your mind to play with it, fine, but use it from a place of being very clear. Remind yourself of what we talked about today. Okay, it's stored in me. Heart kicks in, mind kicks in. Do I want to listen to that stuff? Or do I want to relax, see it for what it is, and let it go? And not play with it because it's going to suppress it or try to control it or whatnot. And then this impression will stay there. And that's the work. That's the work you do. You allow them to come up, feel them for what it is, let them go, relax, and release it. Like I said, it's a miraculous process. It's going to do it on its own. It's going to cleanse you if you do your part. The rest is not up to you. It's up to God. But trust me, He's on your side. So you're not anxious. You only think you are because you fuse with those sensations and feelings and thoughts that contribute to fear. Anxiety is fear-based. But you can detach yourself from that and regain the equanimity, the peace, and the harmony that's inherent in all of life. That's the Tao. That's what Lao Tzu talked about when he talked about the Tao. Life has its own equilibrium. The moment you try to mess up that equilibrium, it doesn't smell good for you. And we do this all the time. We do this about the stuff that makes us stressful, that makes us anxious. We do this about even decisions that we think we have to make. Well, you got to be careful about that one too, because it's the same process that's going on. You're trying to assess and make a decision based on what's going to make me feel good inside. Well, work with the fear, work at the root, and the rest will take care of itself. And it's the same thing with anxiety. Know that it's fear-based. Isolate it, understand it, see everything that it does to you, literally. And if it helps you to write it down, do it. I mean, I remember many, many years ago, I did an exercise, a stoic exercise, that I was asking me to write down every single thing that happened in my day that stirred up something inside. What was it? What was it? What was the ignition point, or what, how is this came about, or how it started, and then how did I feel about it? What did I think? Stuff like that. I don't remember the whole thing, but it helped me to see things for what they were. You can try that if you want. But remain very, very conscious. See yourself as an observer, sitting on the mezzanine watching the play down there happening on the stage. Remain very conscious and choose the higher path, which is the hardest one. To see things for what they are and feel what you need to feel. Just let it out. I'll say it again. You've started with pain. It's going to come out with pain. That's for sure. Are you willing to go through that? That's the question. That's the biggest question. That's where spirituality starts. Willingness. Willingness. Do I have the will to go through what I need to go through in order to free myself from myself so that I may live in peace, joy, bliss, and harmony with life? You're part of life. Your family's part of life. Your friends, your work, everything that surrounds you is life. Can you be in harmony with it all? Yes. The answer is yes. Not always. I can say that I'm not always there. But when I am, boy, do I fly high. And you can do the same thing. You can do the same thing. All right. Work with yourself. You're not anxious. You don't suffer from anxiety. You create it. You create that anxiety and you create that suffering, and you can part from it if only you work with you. All right. Thank you. Until next time. Cheers.